So now with we have amended the appropriate access modifier, and we have tried to rerun the script. So when we rerun the script, so we faced the exception called as an null point exception. So let us let the script runs again. Okay. So it has invoked the browser. At we try to enter the username and password, but we faced the exception called as an null point exception. So, and if you read this statement called as an Java null point exception, it states cannot invoke org.openqa.selenium.webdriver dot find elements. This is because this dot WebDriver is null. So when the WebDriver is null, which indicates like whenever we executing the script, which means like after executing the before annotation, it is trying to execute the appropriate steps which are given in the scenario, and we are having the when statement, and probably like it may execute the when statement. So in the when statement, like we are having the coding called as a driver.find element, which means this driver is having the null value. So the knowledge of the Chrome driver or the Edge driver is not injected to the web driver, and it is having the null value. As the web driver is having the null value, so we are facing the exception called as the null point exception. And how this null point exception can be avoided? So in the further classes, I will be teaching another concept called as a constructor. So with the help of the constructor, like we may initialize this web driver. But today I'm going to give some alternative approach. Let's try to do that and post that in the upcoming session. Like we will be replacing the same with the constructor concept in Java. So now, so in order to rectify this error, I'm going to teach one more thing. So like you all aware, like we have created the methods. So in the methods, like we are having two type of method. So one we call it as an static method, another we call it as an non-static method. Okay. So like if we use the keyword called as an public static void followed by any of the method name, and we have created the block for the method, as we have used the keyword called as an static, we call it as an static method. But if we don't use the keyword called as an static, so let's say I'm not using the keyword called as an static. Okay. So whenever we don't use the keyword called as a static, we call it as an non-static method, which means there are two types of method. One we call it as an static method, and other we call it as an non-static method. So if you observe, like whenever we create the main method in Java, so this is the main method which we have added. So whenever we create the main method, so it's using the keyword called as an static, which means like we are creating the static method. But in many cases, even when we try to map the steps, so what we have done, we have created the methods. But while creating the methods, I haven't used the keyword called as an static. So which means it will act as a non-static method. So what is the difference between the static method and the non-static method? So to understand the difference, so let me just create a Java class. Okay, okay, so just static and non-static example. So here I'm going to create two method. So public static void, let the name of the method be m1, and I'm creating the another method called as an public void m2. Okay, so now we have created the two methods. So we have learned another concept called as an local variable and global variable. So I have told, so the local variable is nothing but like it can be accessible only inside the method, but the global variable can be accessed across the different method. So if I give like a int a is equal to 1, okay, and if I try to use the a is equal to 1 inside the method m2, yes, I can use it up. But if I try to like use the a, or if I try to print the a inside a different method, like for sure it will throw an error, because like this int a is equal to 1 is acting as a local variable. So the local variable can be accessed only inside the same method. So if I print the a in this method called as an m2, I'm not facing any issue. So in order to avoid the issue, like what we have done, so we have given it as a global variable. Okay, so now after making as a global variable, so I'm finding two usage, which means like we are using the a in the line number 9 as well as in the line number 15. So in the line number 15 we didn't get any error, but in the line number 9, so we are getting the error. So like when I hover the mouse over it, it says non-static field A cannot be referenced from the static content. So which means it is a static method, and even the data which we are injecting is a non-static data, because like we haven't used any keywords like static, right? So one and only if you use the keyword called as static, it will become a static data. So if the static keyword is not present, then we call it as a non-static data. So we have certain rules. So generally this static method will accept only static data. Okay, so we can use only the static data inside the static method, but the non-static method will accept both static as well as non-static data. So if I use the keyword called as an static int a is equal to 1, so now the error will be rectified. So as it is of an static data, so like we are able to use the static data inside the static method, as well as like we are not getting any error in the non-static method, which means the static data will accept only the static data, whereas the non-static method will accept both static as well as non-static data. Okay, so this is the first thing we need to have in the mind. So then what is the need of the static method? So how this static method is going to play a role? So like I have told, like in order to use the variables and the classes in the the variables and the methods in the other classes, we need to create a object. Okay, so if I'm planning to use this m1 or m2 in other class, so like in order to use the class and variables in other class, for sure like we may create an object. So how we create an object? Like with the help of the new keyword, we will be creating the object for the respective class. So let's say I'm creating one class, okay, called as an, okay, so this is one class. So I'm just creating the main method. Now I need to run the method called as an m1 and m2 by the other class. So if you need to use one class in other class, for sure we will be creating the object. So like I'm going to create the object for the same. So I'm creating the object for the static non-static example. I'm just giving the variable name as yes. How we will be creating an object? So we are going to create an object with the help of the new keyword, and pose that whenever we create an object, so what happen, all the variables and the method inside this particular class will be initialized. So which means like we can reuse them. Like when I say like the variable name is yes, if I say yes dot, it will list down all the methods which is available. So when I say like yes dot, I could able to see only one method called as an m2. But we are having two methods, right? Like we are having the method m1 and we are having as a method m2, which means like whenever we creating the object, as I told, the object will initialize all the class variables as well as the class methods, which means the m1 should be accessible. But we are not able to like use the m1. So the reason is like there is an another point. So if you need to use static method in other classes, so we don't need to create a object. Okay, so the object creation is not required. Okay, so generally, so whenever we use the um, static keyword without creating object, like we can use the methods in the other class. So how we can use it in the sense, we are having some syntax called as an class name dot method name. Okay, so we can simply provide a class name followed by the method name. So if it is of a static method, we don't need to create an object. So without creating an object, we can access the respective variables and the method. But if it is of a non-static method, so in order to use the non-static method in the other class, for sure, like we need to create a object. So as it is of a non-static method, so the M2 is a non-static method. If we need to call this M2 method in any other classes, which is nothing but if we need to use this M2 method in any other classes, then for sure, like we need to create an object. So now let me just run this particular program and let's see the output. If you see, the output is like kind of a 1, which means the M2 method is executing. If you need to navigate to this M2 method, so just click on control and hover over the M2 method, and if you just click on it, it will be navigating to the M2 method. So as it is having a is equal to 1, so we are able to print the value of a with the help of the M2 method. So in similar way, now I need to execute this M1 method. So as the M1 method is a static, so the static method can be accessible without creating object. So now without creating object, we can access the M1 method by using the syntax called as an class name dot method name. What is the class name? The class name is called as an okay static non-static example. If I give dot, it will list down the methods and variable. So it is listing the method as m1 and the variable as a, because these two are static content. So if we need to access the um, respective method without creation of an object, then we can use the method call, then we can use the keyword called as an static. Okay, as m1 is a static method, so we can access the m1 method in the other class without creating an object. So which means like automatically whenever we use the static keyword, all the variables and whatever the things we have used in the methods are get initialized. But whereas in case of a non-static method, one and only if we create an object, those class variable and the methods will be initialized. But in case of an static, whenever we use the keyword called as a static, which indicates like we don't need to create an object and it will initialize the all class variables and method. So which means nothing but without creating an object, we are able to call it up. So now let me just run this particular coding. So now for sure, like we will be getting the output. If we just look over the output, like it is throwing us 1. So which means like we're able to execute. So the key thing which you guys need to understand here is like 2 points. One is like the static method will accept only static data. Another point, the non-static method will accept the static data as well as non-static data. So that is the first point you need to have. Another thing is like if we need to use the non-static method in the other class, we should
Really?
create an object. And if we need
Sorry
to
to
use
interrupt. Your
just a minute,
voice was breaking.
just my breaking, sorry,
Your voice was breaking. Can you please repeat?
just a minute, I will repeat it up. Okay, so what I told, like we should remember two things. So one is like the static method will accept only the static data, and other point is like the non-static method will accept both static as well as non-static data. And next thing is like if we need to use
I will.
non-static method. Yes, still my voice is breaking.
Yes.
Just a minute, I will change the Wi-Fi. Just stay on the line. Okay, fine. Able to hear me now? Able to see my screen as well? No issues, right? If there is any breakage, please let me know. I have changed the Wi-Fi. Okay, fine. So just let me re-repeat the things. Like we should always have two key points in the static and non-static. So the first two key points is like, so like the static method will accept only the static data. And other thing is like the non-static method will accept both static as well as non-static data. And secondary, like if we need to use the non-static method in the other class, we should create an object. But if we need to use the static method in the other class, so we can call without creating an object followed by the simple syntax called as an class name dot method name. So whenever we create an object which directly indicates like we are initializing the class variables and the class methods. But whenever we use this static keyword, all the class variables and the methods will be get auto initialized. So that is the reason like we are not going to create a method. So now what happening in our case is like, so yesterday, right, we have run the script and we are faced the exception called as an null point exception. So which means the variable is not getting initialized. So even though like we are trying to inherit the things, so but this particular variable called as an WebDriver is not initialized. And how we can initialize in the sense by creating an object. But if we create an object, then for sure like we don't need this inheritance concept, right? Because like without the inheritance, so even if we just directly straight away, if we create an object in the step definition file for the base code class, then we can able to reuse this particular variable called as an driver, and we can reuse the method called as an launch browser. But we are using the inheritance. So even without using inheritance we can call this class. So now as we have used the inheritance, I need to initialize this particular class and this particular variable. So how I can do in the sense, so like I can make it as a static method, because I told, right, so whenever we use the keyword called as a static, so it will initialize the class methods as well as the class variable. So now after adding the static keyword, I'm getting the error in the driver. So the reason is like, as I told, like the static method will accept only the static data, but the WebDriver is a non-static data. So now I'm making it as a static data and I'm trying to run the same code. So I'm just trying to execute the runner. So let me just run this runner and let's see so whether our script is working or not. Okay, so it is invoking the browser, and post that we are able to enter the username and password, as well as like it is able to validate the error message the particular scenario is getting passed. So the reason is like, initially the WebDriver is not initialized properly. So for the initialization, so we need to create an object, but here we are avoiding the object creation by making as a static method and a static variable. So whenever we use the keyword called as an static, so we don't need to create an object. Like without creating an object, like we can reuse the method, as well as it indicates whenever the we use the static keyword, it will automatically initialize the methods and the variable. So now the WebDriver will be get initialized, and the initialized WebDriver can be reused in the step definition as we have inherited the base code. Now as the WebDriver is initialized, so initialized in the sense the WebDriver will gain the knowledge of the edge driver, and the same knowledge is injecting to the other class with the help of the inheritance. Okay, so now we can avoid the null point exception. So this is just an alternative way, but in the real time, so like we are going to use one more concept called as a constructor. So only with the help of the constructor, like we are going to call all the methods, which is nothing but we are going to initialize all the methods that we can discuss in the later part. So till this point, does anyone have any doubts?